Good evening, everybody. I am Sarah Joseph, and I empower people with tools to help strengthen relationships. Um, Tonight, we're talking about finding a balance between kind and firm. And this is week 3 of our 6-week series for school district number 46 on the Sunshine Coast. We're talking in this series about parenting through difficult times. And tonight, we're talking about our parenting styles. So let's jump right in and ask, what is your parenting style? We got research shows that there's 4, general types of parenting styles. The first is authoritarian, and this is like, I'm the boss. So it's my house, my rules, kind of discipline. And authoritarian type parents or boss type parents usually take charge and help their children follow directions by setting high expectations and using threats and punishments and consequences in order to help their kids follow through with the expectations that the parents hold. The second kind, and so while you're listening to this, I hope that you're taking note and kind of checking with yourself to see what kind of parent you are. It helps us to figure out what kind of parent we are, so that we can find out how it's affecting our kids and if that's a good thing, or where you are, so that you can figure out if you need to make improvements or changes for your own sake, because some parenting styles make parenting a bit easier, and for your children's sake. So the second type of parenting is permissive, and this is the friend. So this type of parent is really focused on fun and showing their kids love and giving their kids lots of freedom to figure out problems independently, and not really creating a lot of limits or boundaries for their kids. So kind of kids will be kids, whatever anything goes type of parenting. And then there's the minimalist, so the uninvolved parent. So these parents are often busy with their own things and take a more hands-off approach with few rules or expectations. And so, their kids kind of have the run of the place and do what they'd like. And then the last type of parent is the teacher, authoritative. So these parents are sticklers for rules and expectations, but they practice what they preach, and they often problem solve with their children and listen to what their children have to say. So if you were going to take a guess of which one you lean more towards, I'd love to hear which one that is. You can add it to the comments box or the chat box. And while you're kind of pondering on that, know that research shows that we often, we're not one only, right? We often have like the one that we lean towards more often than not, and then the one that we kind of go to, we're kind of, in times when we're a bit stressed out or we've been triggered. Sometimes they're the same. Sometimes we're a mix depending on the situation or what's going on for us personally. But most people aren't super strong, like I'm the boss all the time. So, there's a bit of a mixed bag usually. Let's see here. What we do tend to do, however, is overcompensate for ourselves and for our partners and end up polarizing instead of finding a balance. So, imagine one parent is quite firm or strict, and the other parent is quite permissive or laissez-faire. What often happens in relationships is opposites attract, right? So we get together with somebody who is our opposite, and they tend to be more strict than us or more permissive than us. And then what happens with parenting is that we, the permissive parent feels that the authoritarian parent is being too harsh, too mean, too firm, too strict. And so they overcompensate and they become more permissive. And then the authoritarian parent feels like the permissive parent is too permissive, too gentle, too laissez-faire. So the authoritarian parent becomes more strict. And so instead of finding this balance of we can work together and the kind and firm can work well together, we end up polarizing in opposite directions, and overcompensating for the other person. So I become more permissive and you become more strict. And we sometimes do that for ourselves as well. If we might be like super kind, super maybe permissive or gentle or really laid back, and then we kind of hit our breaking point and we put our foot down, right? We get really strict all of a sudden. So we like, I'm fun and loving and caring, and then I'm really hard. So sometimes we go from these polarized approaches, and spend a lot of time bouncing between the two instead of finding how to marry the two. So I thought that it'd be helpful if we took a closer look at these types of parenting, just to see how we polarize ourselves and how it would be better to kind of mix the two. So if we're thinking about being permissive, what happens is, we have this low kind of control or strictness in our permissive parenting, and we have a high responsiveness. So we care about the kids' needs, we care about the kids' emotions, we respond to them often, but we don't have a lot of control or strictness or firmness around what's going on in our relationship with our kids. However, there's a lot of warmth, right? So what I like to think about is, what are kids learning from this, right? What are the kids getting from this? What are the positives that the kids are getting out of having a permissive parent, a really kind, shall we say, parent? If they're only getting positives from that experience, what might they be, right? And we can think, they might be learning empathy. They might feel like really good about themselves and be feel loved and have fun and be happy and have a really good relationship with their parent, because their parent is always like really responsive to them. And then and then we can look at the authoritarian. So on the low end of this of our graph, we can see that in an authoritarian, the boss, the warmth is lower, right? They're not as responsive to their children's needs and emotions, but they're more demanding, and there's more strictness and control. So in this type of household, what are the positives that children are learning, right? Because there's pros and cons to each type of parenting. So what are the pros of this firmness, right? And we can think that, kids are well disciplined, they know the rules, there's clear boundaries. There is lots of structure and routines probably. And so kids feel safe, they know what to expect. They know what's expected of them, right? And so they might be able to handle sort of the pressures of the world maybe a bit better than the kids who grew up in a really permissive environment, right? So if we go to the negatives now of what would it be like to be a child growing up in a only permissive home, only kind, we might feel that the kids are not learning how to deal with no's or disappointment or rules or not getting their way. right? So they might not really be prepared for the real world. They might be a bit entitled. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head at the moment. If you have any other ideas, pop them into the comments. And then the authoritarian, the negatives of having a only firm parent might be that the parent seems kind of scary, that they're very high expectations and not very flexible, right? Emotionally distant, so the child might not feel very might not be learning much about how to handle emotions, might feel like their emotions are shut down a lot, might feel bad about themselves when they do something, when they don't meet the expectations of the parent, might not think that they're good enough. Yeah. So when we think about it in that way, I feel it helps us understand that there are both positives and negatives to these approaches. And if we can take both of the positive parts of those approaches and meld it into one parenting style, that would be the authoritative parenting style, or the kind and firm parenting style. So this is where we get to be responsive, and we get to work with our kids and be more democratic and flexible, and yet still have clear boundaries and have some expectations, but help our kids understand what the rules are, explain why the rules are in place. Let's talk about it. So, tend to our kids' feelings. And so we're really marrying the two, the positive aspects from the permissive and authoritarian. Now, the uninvolved parent, this is the type of parenting that we don't really want. There is no pros to this kind of parenting for kids. Kids feel really neglected, and this type of parenting can cause a lot of damage. So we really want to steer clear of this lower quadrant here of the uninvolved parent. Okay. And really we want to lean towards the authoritative. So let's just take a little bit more, a deeper look into this. So again, where the parenting style is the balance between support and control. So we're trying to, the balance between firm and kind, right? Which is support and control. We're trying to lean towards the authoritative parent who's highly supportive and helps with monitoring and setting rules. I care and I give you the freedoms you earn, but for safety related issues, you'll do as I say, right? So we're taking this firm approach, and yet we have this softness to it where we can be open to our children's input and be more cooperative in gaining gaining their cooperation. Be more we're trying to work together. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry. So the permissive is only supportive, and they don't have the rules. And the authoritarian is they set a lot of rules, but they don't offer a lot of support. Okay. So for the kind and firm parenting, what we're really looking at is that authoritative, where kindness is really important in order to show respect for the child, and firmness is really important in order to show respect for ourselves and for the needs of the situation. So the authoritarian methods usually lack the kindness, and the permissive methods lack the firmness. And the uninvolved lack both. So what the research says is that kids raised by the kind and firm parents are more likely to become independent, self-resilient, and self-reliant. They're socially accepted, academically successful, and well-behaved. And They are less likely to report depression and anxiety, and less likely to engage in behavior like risky behaviors like drug use. So what the research shows is really that just having one parent that is kind and firm can make a huge difference in a child's life. But can you imagine if you had both parents who were authoritative? You had this family unit that worked on this concept of power together, right? And like, if we think about what we talked about in our first week together, that power over dynamics, that's really where this comes back to, doesn't it? We were talking about power over in that first week, and these parenting styles really give us that clear view of that. So if we think about the permissive parenting style, would be the parent is the child has power over the parent. Child has power over the parent and permissive. And the authoritarian, the parent has power over the child. But with the authoritative, power is shared, right? So it's really about how we exercise our power when we think about how we parent and where the kind and firm is coming from. It's how we share that sense of power with our kids or not, right? So if you want to, you could think of the authoritarian parent more as the drill sergeant, the power over, and the authoritative parent aims to inspire cooperation by fostering positive feelings and teaching kids the reasons for the rules. So one of the ways that we can do this kind and firm parenting, is to really bring "and" into the conversation. So this is one of my favorite tools as a parent, as in a classroom, working with kids at all, even working with adults. The word "and" it makes a huge difference in conversations. Language is important, and when we're able to use the word "and" instead of a "but," we're really able to bring kind and firm together and avoid those extremes. So the beginning of the sentence really helps us validate feelings and show understanding, and then the "and" provides the link to the setting of the limits, or setting of the boundary, or giving direction. So an example is, "I know you don't want to brush your teeth, and we can do it together," right? Or, "You want to keep playing, and it is time for bed. Do you want one story or two?" Right? So we can use the "and" in quite a bit of different situations. And I think the key here is to recognize that our children are, we're allowed to set a boundary, we're allowed to set that limit, and our children are allowed to be disappointed or upset by that. They don't have to like our limits and our boundaries. And I think this is somewhere, the place where we often lose in the kind and firm struggle, and end up polarizing. Because we feel uncomfortable with our child's reaction to us setting a boundary or setting a limit. And so when they feel upset, and maybe cry or say no or talk back, what ends up happening for us is we feel like we need to shut that down in order to hold our boundary, right? Hold that limit. The truth is that we can still maintain our boundary and provide them with the comfort to help them through that emotional upset, right? We can say, "You look disappointed." We can give them a hug. We can comfort them through it and still maintain the boundary and not give in. And I think that is one of the places where it's the most challenging for parents, and we often crumble. Either we move towards the firmness of we set the limit, our child gets upset, and then we shut down their emotions. Or we set the limit, our child gets upset, and then we give in, right? So if we're able to find a way in those moments to really be able to hold that space emotionally for our child, so be able to use the validating of feelings, the showing understanding, and using the word and to maintain the boundary, then what we're really doing is we're showing our kids that it's okay to be upset, that they're not always going to get their way, um, and that we can handle their emotions, that we understand what it feels like to be in that situation where we're disappointed or upset that we can't do what we wanted to do. And also we convey to them that we're not actually heartless. Sometimes that's how they feel when we set a boundary, right? So we can convey to them that we're just people too, and we understand that it sucks to have to turn the TV off in the middle of your favorite show, but screen time is over, right? And so, did you hear that? But screen time is over, and it didn't feel so good. Had I said it with the and, it might feel better, right? Oh, I know it feels really terrible to turn the TV off in the middle of your favorite show, and screen time is still over. Right? Let's plan together when you're going to watch it next, when you're going to get a chance to finish the show. When do you think that is? Right? We can move on to a solution then. And of course, just understanding, just because our children are upset, are whining, are disappointed, doesn't mean that they're not going to do what we've asked them to do, or follow through, right? If it's around doing chores or doing homework or whatever it is that we've asked them to go get their teeth brushed and they're resisting, right? Sometimes that resistance is simply that response of being upset that they have to move on and do something, right? And so, if you've asked your child to unload the dishwasher and they start whining about it, it doesn't mean that they're not going to unload the dishwasher. It just means that they're having an emotional response to it. And so when we can tend to that emotional response and still maintain that expectation, then that helps our children, right? It helps them know that it's okay to have an emotional response, and you're still going to have to do the chore, right? And that is us moving towards the kind and firm parenting. Now, kind and firm parenting is, as I said, we have a tendency to overcompensate for ourselves and for our partners, polarizing us away from being kind and firm and moving us towards strictness and permissiveness. It does take some focus and some conscious effort to move towards the center of being kind and firm instead of polarizing. And I feel like it's a pretty easy formula. It's just harder to put into practice, right? It's easier said than done. When we have the formula of really what we're doing is just maintaining respect for everybody, for you, for me, for the situation. When we recognize that validating feelings and setting limits can go together, then it's a pretty easy formula, right? The problem is that we're not robots. We have feelings and we get triggered and we get busy and there's stress and things don't always go the way that we think they're going to go. And so, again, parenting is such a journey, and parenting in the way that you want to parent is a practice. It's not going to go that way every single time. And if you remember from last week, we were talking about our brains and how right now we're just under more stress. right? We're under more stress. And so our window of tolerance is going to be smaller. So if you find yourself moving, from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, know that that is okay. It's normal. And what we want to do is bring more consciousness to the fact that we're doing that. And when we bring more consciousness to the fact that we're doing that, then what we're able to do is start moving towards the center, start moving towards a balanced place of finding kind and firm, right? We're not meant to, this information is not meant for you to take in and go out into the world and start parenting and then feel terrible and judge yourself constantly because you're not finding that perfect balance every single day. The idea is that we want to bring more awareness to where we are on the spectrum so that we can make more of a conscious effort to move towards that center balance of kind and firm. And some days we're going to nail it, right? We're going to do awesome and we're going to nail it completely. And other days we're not. And that's okay. The effort is what is really important here. And that when we make mistakes, we take responsibility for those mistakes. Where we're able to apologize to our kids for overreacting, right? And we're able to come back to that place of being kind and firm. So when you move into the spectrum, you'll want to be able to come back to the center and, talk to your kids about what that reaction was, right? I was having a bad day and I took it out on you and that was wrong with me. Here I am again. So, all right. So let me sign off this week with saying thank you for joining me. Try your best to do some kind of firm parenting this week and see how it goes. But again, just stay conscious of where you are in that spectrum. And next week, I can't remember what I'm talking about. So let me just go find that for you and I'll tell you. It is going to be something good. I know it is. I'm super smart about setting this thing up, but I can't remember what it is. Here we go. Let me look and see. It is understanding behavior. So next week, we're going to talk more about what is driving our kids' behavior in the way that what we're seeing and how we can understand it more and maybe figure out what's going on under the behavior, because behavior is really just a communication tool, right? Kids communicate through their behavior and so do adults. So what are they communicating to us? And how can we help maybe steer that communication into a better path, right? Okay, so next Monday, 8 p.m., join me here live.